What's up, guys? Hopefully you're having a great week, and we are in week 3 of the series called Free People. We're talking about freedom and rules and how they both can come together and actually benefit us. And sometimes when I think about rules and freedom, zombies come to mind, and you might be thinking, what on earth are you talking about? Well, for a season of time, I really watched The Walking Dead. I stayed up to date with it, and then I don't know how many seasons there are now, but it just kind of died off probably a couple years ago for me. So I haven't watched it in a while, but I don't know how you feel about zombies, like if you like movies or if you even like The Walking Dead, but I personally think they're terrifying, right? I would never want to be caught with a bunch of zombies around me. And everywhere you go, when you see this idea of zombies taking over the world, the civilization collapse. Rules and laws disappear. It's like everyone's for themselves and they don't care what happens. And suddenly, it's everyone who can survive. I don't care if you were a friend. If I can push you towards to a zombie and you die, then I'm gonna push you to that so I don't die. But maybe for you, the last couple weeks as we talk through these rules and how they relate to freedom, that doesn't really sink in for you of, I kind of get that, I kind of don't get it. So let me throw another question out there and you can pause this video and talk about it. If you were a king or a queen for a day, if you were a king or queen for the day, what would you do? What rules would you make? Which rules would you break or take away? Pause this video right now and talk about it. So being in charge can be pretty fun, right? Maybe for you, you'd fill your calendars with things that you would love to do and maybe take away things that you didn't want to do. Maybe for you, you would cancel classes, maybe even cancel school altogether. Maybe you pass laws that you thought would make you happy, make you have more fun, be convenient for you. Whatever it might be, let me ask you this question. What would happen if someone else had the power? What would happen if someone else had the power and they wanted to do whatever they wanted and those wants were different from your wants? Or what if there were more people trying to determine what to tell you and how to live? It would frustrate us because here's the thing, we all want freedom to do our own thing. And if anyone wants different things, if two people want different things, how do we decide which one do we get? And I can think about this growing up. When I was little, my dad was a pastor. He's still a pastor today. But I remember myself walking around the church telling people, well, my dad's the pastor, I can do whatever I want. And that got me in trouble a lot of times in Sunday school when I told the Sunday school teacher my dad could fire them even though they're volunteers. But stupid Caleb was like, well, if you don't be nice to me, my dad will fire you. And they went and told my dad, yep, that was some trouble right there. It's not easy to always balance what we want and what others want. And sometimes we're not even sure how to compromise with them most of the time. But most of the time, we want to make decisions that benefit us. We want to make decisions that benefit us. And for the last couple of weeks, we looked at a couple things. One being this idea that all the laws of the Old Testament hang on two laws, loving God and loving others. And according to Jesus, if you can love God and love others as yourself, then you will continue to live out a life that's pleasing to God. And so we've been talking about this guy named James, right? Brother of Jesus. He wasn't a king, but he was still a very powerful person. He was very influential. He had a lot of power, influence, and he had a lot of times to settle disputes between people in the church. And he had to make a rule, is this right or is this wrong? And so today we're going to look at a couple passages of scripture, but most of the early followers of Jesus were Jewish people who believed that Jesus was the Messiah that God had promised. But everyone who followed Jesus, they weren't from a Jewish background. And some of these early Jesus followers believed that everyone needed to convert to Judaism in order to follow Jesus, and converting to that wasn't an easy task. And so others, though, they believed the only thing that they needed to do was trust Jesus and follow him. And James listened carefully to all the perspectives, and you can take a look at this in Acts chapter 15 if you want to. And no one should be forced to go through, is what he determined, all these things to become, to work with Judaism in order to follow Jesus. And he kind of phrased it this way. No one should be forced to go through lots of difficult steps in order to follow Jesus. And did that decision make James uncomfortable? Probably, because there's a group of people that felt differently. And if it's anything like me, I really don't like it when people are in disagreement. James grew up Jewish and he followed Jewish laws, so it would have been comfortable to tell them to do the opposite of, yeah, you do need to become Jewish in order to follow Jesus. But James took a more difficult path because James understood that his decision wouldn't impact God's love for him. He was free to do whatever he wanted. But James also committed to following Jesus' law of love, of loving God and loving others. And he knew the most loving thing that he could do was make it easy for people to follow Jesus. So James decided his comfort was not as important as loving others. And I wonder if James was thinking about this situation when he writes in James chapter 2. So pause this video and read James chapter 2, verses 12 through 13. See, what James is saying in this passage is a few things. First, the law gives freedom. God's law, the law of love, gives us freedom. We're free to make decisions that benefit us and also give us what we want if we want. And God's not going to stop that or stop loving us any less. But we also have to be prepared for judgment. See, God's law gives us the freedom, but we're also called to speak and act out of love for God and others. This is a thing we'll be judged on. Next, there will be no mercy for the unmerciful. James isn't threatening us in this passage. He's just reminding us that justice has a way of coming back around when we mistreat people or take advantage of other people or prioritize others over ourselves over others. We will essentially face consequences. But God is merciful to the merciful. And when we have compassion, when we're forgiving, when we're gracious to others, God sees that and recognizes that. You could say that we have the freedom to treat people however we would like, but when we live in a way that prioritizes our wants and comforts at the expense of others, we're not really free. And that's what Jesus told us. The most important thing we can do besides loving God is love others. And this is why the book of James tells us to show mercy to other people instead of judgment, because we'll never live freely as long as we're living for ourselves. And this is one thing, there's one thing we'll someday answer for is how well did we love God and how well did we love other people? And we could make decisions that benefit only ourselves, but here's the thing. Free people make decisions that benefit others. Free people make decisions that benefit others. So let's think back to this decision that James had to make. If you were an earlier follower of Jesus, how do you think you would have responded? Would you have wanted all the new Jesus followers to go through the same steps that you went through to become Jewish? Do you think that you would have been okay by putting your comfort and your traditions and your experience aside for the sake of others? What would you do if you disagree with the people making the final decisions? It's almost impossible, though, to put ourselves in those shoes of these early followers of Jesus, but the disagreement is a lot like disagreements we have with each other today, right? So this wasn't like a good versus evil debate. This was everyone involved was trying to do what was good. And trying to do what was honoring to God. There wasn't really a clear answer. And so everyone in the conversation had the same goal. They wanted to see people come to know Jesus, but they disagreed at how to achieve that goal. And there were probably some people who got angry at James' decision and couldn't understand his point of view, but James ultimately made a decision that prioritized others over himself. It put others before him, and I'm so grateful he did, because if James had chosen differently, you and I might have never had the opportunity to follow Jesus. So someday in the future, there'll be a time when you'll be put in charge. You'll have to make decisions that maybe not be right or wrong, but are best over good. For instance, like being in charge of a group project, or being a captain of your sports team, or being someone's boss, or a mentor of someone that's younger than you, or being a parent. Throughout life, you'll have plenty of chances to be in charge, make rules, make big decisions. And that's a lot of authority for one person. So when you're in charge, what do you do with that power? How do you act? You'll be tempted to use it for your own gain at times. How can it benefit me? But don't do that. Using your authority to your own gain might be nice for the moment, but in the long run, it won't be as satisfying as you might think it would. Instead, follow James's lead. Be wise, merciful, and lead with love. Use your power to benefit others, not just yourself. But this isn't something you have to wait to practice and to do in the future. You actually don't have to have kids or employees or people under your command to lead well in love. You can make decisions that benefit other people every single day, right? Like the way you treat your family, how you treat your mom and your dad and your brother and sister, what you do for your friends. Are you nice to them? Do you help them? Are you just have that friendship to gain something out of it instead of trying to give? How you use your time, your money, your talents. If you aren't prioritizing others over yourself right now, gaining more power or influence will not all of a sudden make you do that as well. The journey starts right now. So how can you leverage the influence and power you already have to benefit others? In what ways do you already have influence? Like, are you influencing your friends, your friend group, your social media, your team, any younger family member that you might have influence? What kind of decisions do you have the power to influence at your home, at school, at church, in your group of friends, or in this world? How will you manage the influence and power you already have? Will it be a benefit, or will you use it to benefit you? Or will you use it to benefit others? But thanks to Jesus, we now have freedom, but we'll never live as freely as He wants us to when we're living just for ourselves. Because here's the reality: free people make decisions that benefit others. Free people make decisions that benefit others. So as you jump into small groups, as you talk about this with your families, let me encourage you, think of ways that you can help others and prioritize them over yourselves. Hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week.